He stood at the head of the table, glass of wine in hand, retelling one of Marcus's training missions offshore. The family laughed. Pride filled the room like heavy smoke. I waited for the noise to fade before saying softly, "I just received a commendation for identifying a breach in our defense network. We neutralized it before it reached the base." My father smiled, gentle, dismissive. "War isn't fought with codes, Sibylla. It's fought with courage." His hand tapped mine, and the gesture felt less like affection than a verdict. That night, his words lodged in my chest like shrapnel. He didn't hate me. He hated that I had redefined the meaning of courage. 2 years later, I was stationed at NORAD in Colorado Springs, surrounded by humming servers and the cold blue glow of radar screens. We guarded the nation's invisible wall, cyber defense, missile tracking, the pulse of North America itself. That morning, an alert flared across my console. An unfamiliar signal had breached our satellite network. I traced the coordinates, my stomach tightening as the source resolved on screen. USS Gideon, the naval vessel under my father's command. I reported it immediately. The chain of command ordered me to wait for naval verification. 40 minutes. I stared at the countdown on my monitor. 11 minutes before total system compromise. Waiting meant silence. Silence meant failure. "Override verification," I ordered. "Bypass Navy command. Lock down channel." No one moved. My team stared at me. Then, without another word, they followed. The screens flickered red, then green. The breach collapsed. We had saved the network. For one brief moment, I believed I'd done the right thing. By morning, I was suspended, charged with breaching national security protocols. When I returned home, my father was waiting in his immaculate dress whites, eyes like cold glass. "You interfered with Navy operations." "I saved them, Father." "You embarrassed me." That night, I finally understood the law of our family. Saving lives meant nothing. Obedience was the only virtue that counted. What none of us knew then was that the breach hadn't come from him at all, but from a compromised relay under his command. He was innocent of the attack, yet he still condemned me, because in his world, defiance was the gravest sin. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't fighting the system anymore. I was fighting my own blood. 3 weeks after Sentinel, the hearing room felt less like a courtroom and more like an interrogation cell. Harsh light, hard questions, and nowhere to hide. I sat behind the one-way glass in uniform, the rank on my collar suddenly a target rather than a shield. When the door opened and my father walked in, every breath in the room seemed to freeze. "Admiral Lionel Wentworth, character witness for the prosecution," the clerk announced. He placed his hand on the Bible with the practiced steadiness of a man who has sworn oaths his whole life. And then he spoke in that measured voice. He did not stumble. He did not hesitate. He painted my action as a deliberate breach, an affront to order, a danger to classified assets. They played the recording. It began with my voice. "I'm taking control of the line." Then the tape went black, where my warning should have been, where I said the ship was compromised. The cut was clean. The silence left a hole that swallowed the rest of the truth. "That's convenient," I whispered. My lawyer's eyes told me to keep my mouth closed. The prosecution smiled like predators do. They had witness, tape, and the spectacle of my father's testimony turning family into ammunition. Marcus sat in the gallery, hands folded, gaze fixed on the papers in his lap. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His silence wasn't innocence. It was a choice to preserve an image. That refusal stung more than any accusation. The next morning, the papers branded me. "Admiral's daughter brings shame to the Navy." My father did not deny it. He doubled down. He was defending a reputation, not the truth. They moved me to a concrete cell in Colorado Springs. No windows, one metal table, 2 unforgiving lights. Time thinned into the hum of the HVAC and the soft scraping of boots in the corridor. 3 days passed with no visitors, no meaningful updates from my counsel. Everything I had built felt at risk of being legally erased. Sleep fled me. I turned the same question over and over. How could right lose to ritual? Then, in a sliver of daylight through the narrow slot, I remembered Sentinel Red 17, the classified after-action summary signed off under an emergency clause. If that document could be authenticated in court, the charges evaporated. The problem? It was eyes only. Revealing it without authorization meant exposing myself to treason charges. I had two choices: plead and plead for mercy, or force the machine to cough up its own records. I folded a scrap of paper and began to sketch a plan. No speeches, no begging. Just one precise lever pulled inside the system so that the system itself would produce the proof they insisted did not exist. That night, I listened to the guards outside. "They say her father's a legend," one said. "She'll be erased." I let the words hang there while I smiled, quietly. In the dark, my counterattack took shape. I found Callahan in the interrogation room downstairs, young, pale, paperwork piled like a paper wall between us. He rubbed his eyes and said, quietly, "They're offering a plea. Dishonorable discharge. No jail time." "No," I said, flat and patient. "We won't fight the charges. We'll dismantle them." He blinked. I slid a sheet across the table and wrote one line. "In-camera review. DOD Regulation 5.4. He stammered. "That's a closed session procedure." I pushed the paper back. "File it. Don't ask who approved it." He filed it. He didn't know that asking for an in-camera review drags classified material into judicial scrutiny, forces the department itself to recheck the very file they'd been hiding. By filing, we set a gear turning inside a machine that prefers silence. 2 days later, the message came. Request accepted. Someone high up had signed. My chest unclenched. Only one person had that power. General Greaves had pulled the lever without fanfare. She didn't call me. She didn't need to. Her act said, clearly, she believed there was cause to look. Outside the base, the press screamed. A camera shoved toward my face. "Did you hack your father's ship?" I looked past the lens. I had no answer they deserved. That night, in the cell, I wrote in my notebook, "They built their empire on ceremony. I'll dismantle it with silence." Then a guard handed me a small black envelope stamped with NORAD. Inside was an order. Red 17 transferred to restricted judicial file. It had reached the judge. For the first time in months, I breathed without flinching. The tide had begun to turn. They called me into a small room the night before the trial. My father sat waiting in his dress whites. He didn't meet my eyes when he said, "I never wanted it to come to this." "Then why did you make it?" I asked. "You embarrassed the Navy. You embarrassed me. I saved lives. You disobeyed." He offered a bargain, plead guilty. He would try to spare me the worst of the fallout. "I can save what's left of your name." I looked at him and said, "My name doesn't need saving. The truth will." He stood, adjusted his cap, and left. When the guard set another black envelope on the table, I recognized the red seal. Top secret, NORAD Red 17. Inside was a one-page after-action summary, signed by General Greaves. The final line crushed the prosecution before they could speak. Captain Sibylla Wentworth acted under emergency directive with full authorization. I smiled, whispered, "It arrived." I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the cell wall and rehearsed nothing, because tomorrow, the system would have to answer for itself. The military courtroom in Washington, D.C. gleamed under relentless lights. The air smelled of leather, metal, and disinfectant, a cold, sterile perfume of control. Every seat was filled, rows of uniforms, reporters, silent watchers waiting to see me break. Across from me sat my father in his immaculate white dress uniform, ribbons shining like small lies. What was about to happen wasn't justice. It was a public execution of honor. The prosecutor, a gray-haired man with a voice sharp enough to cut, began pacing. Captain Sibylla Wentworth willfully compromised Navy security. She defied the chain of command, endangering national assets. This isn't a matter of complexity, it's a matter of discipline. He stopped in front of me, pointing as if to pin me in place. She is a disgrace to the uniform her father once honored. The room drew a single, collective breath. Cameras clicked, pens scratched. My hand rested on the sealed black envelope beside me. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. When his speech finally ended, the judge nodded. "Defense, you may proceed." Callahan stood, his voice calm and almost reverent. "Your Honor, the defense calls no witnesses. We submit one classified document for private review." A wave of noise rippled through the room. "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted. "This is a stunt! The defense has rested." The judge's hand came down. "Objection overruled. Submit the document." I rose, slid the envelope across the table. The red seal broke with a sound so sharp it sliced through the air. The judge read once, then again. The change in his face was slow, deliberate, shock melting into awe, and finally, respect. He placed the document down, stood, and faced me. Without a word, he lifted his hand in a salute. The room followed in reflex, every soldier rising to attention. My father stood too, his body obeying muscle memory before his mind caught up. When realization struck, he froze mid-salute, eyes wide, lips parting just slightly. For the first time in my life, my father looked small. The judge's voice was steel. "All charges against Captain Wentworth are dismissed with extreme prejudice. Her actions were authorized under emergency directive, per Operation Sentinel." He turned toward the prosecutor, then my father. "This court now enters a matter of perjury in a classified case." Silence consumed the room. No one moved. No one dared breathe. I didn't look away. I simply met my father's eyes. A calm, steady gaze, without anger, without triumph, only truth. When the judge stepped down and every uniformed man bowed his head, I remained seated, spine straight, eyes forward. I was no longer the accused. I was the reckoning. The news spread through the Pentagon before the ink on the verdict had even dried. A secret trial. A public outcome. By morning, every major outlet carried the headline: "Court overturns verdict in Admiral's daughter case." No one knew what the classified file contained, but everyone had heard about the salute, the moment a judge rose to honor the woman he was meant to condemn. Inside the military's marble halls, whispers replaced protocol. Some called it redemption, others called it chaos. But for me, it was simply the sound of a machine realizing it had turned on one of its own. The next day, the Military Oversight Committee launched an internal investigation. The prosecutor was the first casualty, found guilty of falsifying evidence and mishandling classified material. He was stripped of authority and reassigned to the archives, a bureaucratic graveyard for the ambitious. His name would fade in silence, just as he had hoped mine would. Then came my father. He was summoned to Naval Command, a meeting so discreet that even the corridors outside were cleared. The inquiry revealed that he had submitted an edited recording, cut precisely to remove the part that could have cleared me. The report's conclusion was short and merciless: gross negligence and personal misconduct. They didn't court-martial him. His decades of service still meant something to the old guard, and the Pentagon preferred quiet shame over public scandal. But he lost everything that defined him: his advisory title, his club privileges, his place at the table. For a man who once commanded fleets, it was worse than any sentence. Marcus was reassigned to Alaska under the label temporary relocation. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. I didn't hate him for it. Weakness in our world was its own form of guilt. A few weeks later, a letter arrived on my desk, cream paper, precise handwriting, from General Eleanor Greaves. "Quiet competence saves nations. The world doesn't always need to see your fight, only its results." Reading it, I felt the weight of something settle. Not pride, not vengeance, but closure. Shortly after, my reinstatement came through. Full rank, promotion, Section Chief, Cyber Defense Division, NORAD. The title meant less than what it represented. I was back in the same command center, where people once whispered my name like a cautionary tale. Now, every order I gave carried the authority to alter national strategy. On my first day back, I saw Callahan in the corridor. He stopped mid-step, straightened his posture, and raised his hand in a sharp salute. No words, no apology, just the quiet recognition of truth. And that single gesture meant more than any vindication I'd ever imagined. A year passed before the world stopped feeling like a battlefield. The snow outside my office at NORAD fell in soft, steady sheets, blanketing the mountains until the horizon disappeared. Inside, the radar hummed its eternal rhythm, the pulse of a world I had helped keep safe. The sound no longer felt mechanical. It felt alive. An email arrived. The subject line read, "I am sorry." The sender's name stopped me. Lionel, Wentworth a Navy, Mill. I opened it. The first line. "I did what I thought was right. You'll understand someday." No explanation, no apology. Just the same logic that had justified everything he'd done. I sat still, staring at the words until they blurred. Not from tears, I had none left, but from the weight of how little they meant. My hand hovered over the delete key. I paused, long enough to realize I felt no anger, no ache. Then I pressed it. The message vanished, and with it, the last thread tying me to his shadow. For the first time, silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like peace. I stood, walked down the corridor of glass,